All right, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Chorus Communications Summer School Lunch and Learn webinar series. I'm your summer school host, Jamie Scotto-Kataya, CEO of JSA. And I'm honored to be spending the next 4 weeks here with you right until the end of August for these 1-hour webinar sessions every Wednesday starting at noon Eastern. And we have a few folks to thank, of course, first and foremost, Chorus Communications for putting together another fantastic, creative way to get more channel education to the marketplace. And thanks to our webinar partners, Eat Engage, because of their registration form. Each week a lunch of your choice will be arriving to your door so you can chow down while learning, all during your lunch hour. This is the lunch order you selected when registering, so hopefully your meals arrived and you're able to kick back a little with us and learn more about today's presenting company, RapidScale. And as a friendly reminder, you do need to register separately each and every week so you can choose your restaurant and lunch selection each week. So don't forget, do it now, sign up for next week. And thanks to Chorus and our presenters, we are able to provide a little extra bonus if you attend all 7 webinars. So don't forget to register and register again. You guys are doing great. And one last housekeeping note. We will be doing a weekly drawing for a $100 gift certificate for all those who have pre-submitted questions for our presenting companies. That's happening at the end of this webinar, so stay tuned for that. And thank you already for those who have pre-submitted questions. And hey, it's never too late for a good question, as you hear from our presenters today. If you have questions, we will try our best to leave time for a little audience Q&A at the end. So go ahead and type in your question in that chat box. You can find the chat box by scrolling over that Zoom screen. The nav bar is going to appear at the bottom. Just click on chat, type in your questions. Time permitting, we'll either address them live or get back to you post-webinar. All right, let's get started. This week's presenter is Dylan Bouders. He's the Director of Solutions Engineering for RapidScale. And we also are joined by Janine Sosinski. She's the Partner Experience Manager over at RapidScale. Dylan, Janine, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. So first off, let's hear a little bit about your role in the organization. Dylan, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm the Director of Solutions Engineers. And what that is more generically, my team are sales engineers. We roll up to the engineering side of the business, so we are responsible and most accountable for the solution's accuracy. And my team is responsible for understanding our entire portfolio of solutions, being able to evaluate customers' needs, and ultimately position the right solution of those individual products to meet those needs. And of course, communicate the initial requirements to our engineering team for implementation and migration.
Wonderful. And Janine, I have to say, I love your title, Partner Experience, something that we love to hear. Tell us a little bit more there.
Thank you. So I am Janine Sosinski. I am the Partner Experience Manager. So I manage the experience from the partners all the way down to the end of the sale. So I work hand in hand with Chorus. I work hand in hand with any of the agents that Chorus works with to help identify opportunities, to help once we do identify them, bring them in, work with Dylan and Dylan's team to take and present a technical solution with them, and then hopefully in turn we'll end up closing the deal and then onboarding them as a customer. I am based in the Philly area, so I am easily accessible for meetings and to work hand in hand and do sales calls and on the road with you guys. So happy to support you however I can.
Love that. So what are the key differentiators for your channel partner program in a nutshell?
So, one thing that I will say, that is a key differentiator, RapidScale is 100% channel organization. So we actually don't have a direct sales force, and you're not competing with a direct sales force. So we work only with partners, which is definitely a huge value add. And one of the things about RapidScale, we were actually started by an agent, 10, 11 years ago. He was an agent like all of the agents that Chorus works with. He felt a need for our services in the marketplace and then grew up and really built, a very agent channel centric organization. So that's a huge differentiator in our channel program.
Oh, I love that. Built of and for by agents. Love that. Are there any particular verticals that your company successfully targets in terms of its customer base?
Yeah, there certainly are some verticals that we target, and we kind of go a little bit in more detail about that, further on. But, we see a lot of success in healthcare, in finance, in even law firms, manufacturing companies, retail as well. So there are a couple of, things that really, say what a good prospect or client is for RapidScale. And I think, it's limited IT resources. They have less than, 2,000 employees, and, multiple locations. So, we play across a lot of different verticals. So a lot of the ones that are hot are ones that people are, dealing with HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, or any level of security or compliance that they need. RapidScale can help them with that.
Great. And are there any particular regions? Are you nationwide in particular regions or international even?
Yeah, so the majority of our customers are U.S. based, but we also have, U.S. based companies that have different locations all around the world. So I would consider that, we are a worldwide company. We have 4 data centers in the United States, and then we also have 2 abroad, one in Amsterdam and one in Hong Kong.
Wonderful. And how long is a traditional client engagement? Once they sign up, do they stay with you for 3 months, a year, 5 years?
Yeah, so typically our clients stay with us for longer than 3 years, right? Majority of our clients stay on board for 3 years, and I think our average is about 5 years that customers stay with us. So, we are a very sticky organization. Clients love the service and support that RapidScale gets. And the nice thing about RapidScale is that they can start off really small, and we have the tools and the facilities to help them grow and become a bigger organization over time.
Oh, I love that client stickiness. We're always looking for that. So what is the typical sales cycle? What is the average time to get a prospect to sign?
It typically all depends, right? That's a really good question. It depends, like any business, it depends on a sales cycle and time. We see deals close as quickly as 2 weeks, but then we see some of the larger, more complex deals that are, 6 months to 12 months. It all depends on where the prospect is in their IT planning cycle, where their budgets, their contracts are ending, where their new budgets are beginning. But I'd say, average, we could see a 3-month close is pretty standard.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so last question, and then I'm turning the reins over to you guys. Looking forward, what do you see as that top trend of service that RapidScale is going to leverage in the next, say, 12 months?
Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sure. The last question for you, and then we'll move off this hot seat and right into your presentation. But what is that top trend or service that RapidScale will be leveraging in the next 12 months? Looking forward here.
Okay. Well, I think that is a great question to lead us on to our presentation. RapidScale provides a wide breadth of services within the cloud marketplace, but I think the one that's really, really hot right now is desktop as a service, and leveraging a DaaS environment to secure the mobile workforce, to keep everything secure for the employees and for the company at a large.
Oh, love that. Okay, well, thank you, Janine and Dylan. Please go ahead and tell us more about desktop as a service and RapidScale.
Yeah, so Dylan, I will kick it over to you to lead this, but I will be on the back burner to jump in and answer questions as needed, and hopefully we can get some good audience engagement, guys. If you have good engagement, we have a special prize for you at the end. So
we love that.
All right, thanks very much. So we'll go ahead and kick off the slides here, and this is, I think, intended to be. Janine and I are kind of going to almost converse back and forth as we go through this slide deck, just to make it a little less mundane. I like to occasionally slide in some jokes here and there, so hopefully it's not too dry. Hopefully you're focused on the technology, which is definitely not dry, and very, very interesting. So first question here is, how many of your customers have had a security breach, and I'm not sure if we're exactly asking you to answer that, but it's a good question for us to ask you so that you can start asking that to your end consumers and customers and clients, because it's not a typical question. Usually you're asking about their circuits, their contracts, want to see their bills, but you're not saying, when have you most recently had a security breach or have you? Usually because you don't know how to take their answer and then do something with it. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a little better idea. And if you're ready to dive into that pool, please engage with us. We'll be happy to work with you on that. So the slide here, we're going to talk about how the world has evolved when it comes to security events, and it's vastly different now than it was even a couple of years ago, considerably. So some of that is just the complexity at which malicious parties are engaging with with different types of technologies, with different ways of gaining access to sensitive data. It's not just hacks that all happen behind the scenes. Some of it happens right in front of your screen via email or some kind of web page. And end user education is critical. It's crucial. We can talk about products all day long, but if the users aren't educated on things to look out for and how to be cautious about the things they're doing on a daily basis, then almost certainly something is going to happen at some point in that business. What we want to do is minimize that risk. I don't think any company will say they can completely eliminate it. So 83% of organizations are at risk because of complexity, almost certainly because their data is out in the wild. Data sits on laptops. You've got creep of data into services like Dropbox, Box. You're synchronizing data so they can get access to it at home because the organization hasn't adopted technologies that allow the end users to be mobile and be productive, and most importantly, be secure and follow company policy, if there's a company policy at all. We've got new generations of workers, and common in our conversations now around how the desktop as a service and why it's evolving. Part of that is millennials. Part of it is the fact that they have a certain way that they work, and trying to put them into a specific box and make them work in that box is probably not going to be the most successful. Usually what you want to do is let's give them tools to allow them to work the most comfortably. I'm not saying sitting on a couch necessarily, but maybe it is. But let them use their Macs. Let them use devices that they're comfortable with. Let them work where they feel most comfortable and can be the most productive. Of course, it's on the company to evaluate productiveness. And there's just a lot of things happening on the internet, and trying to protect from them, being able to secure the different endpoints and places that the data may reside is crucial. So what are all the different methods that I kind of just touched on a second ago? We've got users all around. There's laptops, there's iPads, working from home, working from the office, working from Starbucks. And in a traditional world, the data resides on those end devices. Does the company really feel secure that that data is not going to be lost or in the wrong hands? And I don't think you can ever really say yes without having a relatively complex set of tools in place and processes in place to back up the data, to encrypt the data. And then that just leads to more overhead from a help desk perspective and administrative overhead around the engineering team and the IT team for managing all of that. There's a much more streamlined and efficient way to do that, and desktop as a service is that. And then you also have SaaS applications. You have mobile applications, and how do you kind of wrap all that into a single comprehensive solution? So the security landscape. I'm not sure exactly when this statement was made. It seems relatively, for me, seems pretty obvious. If it was stated 4 or 5 years ago, I think maybe it would have been a little more interesting. But yeah, cybercrime is absolutely the greatest threat to every company in the world. That's according to IBM CEO. If you don't feel like that's the case, I'd be interested to hear what your thought is. We have a very accurate perspective, given the fact that we secure almost 1,000 customers worth of data. We have tens of thousands worth of desktops under management, and we see a lot of impact to our customers when it comes to security when they don't subscribe to the things that we recommend in some cases. Cybercrime damage costs are expected to hit $6 trillion annually by 2021. That's not that far off. $6 trillion is pretty significant. I just recently saw in the news that Apple finally became the first trillion dollar company in, I think, the world technically, but in the U.S. We're talking about 6 times the size of Apple just in cybercrime damage to U.S. companies. That's pretty crazy. Global spending on security products are going to exceed $1 trillion by 2021, and I think everybody on the phone here is in a great position to take advantage of that and be a part of that. And then 31% of organizations have experienced cyber attacks on operational technology infrastructure. That's probably higher than that, to be honest with you. It's higher from my purview, but we'll go with 31%. Just keep in mind, you asked that first question that we mentioned a few slides ago, and you'll start to experience that 31%, and then you'll start to open up some opportunities. Even if you don't have the answer, write down their answer. You don't have to be the expert. Write down the answer, engage with a strategic partner, and then let's have a conversation with them and determine what we can do to help them feel more comfortable and sleep at night. And there's certainly not one solution. So what is DaaS? DaaS can incorporate a lot of things that we would traditionally implement from a traditional desktop perspective. So with traditional desktops, we have management of the image, we have patching of the image in the applications, we have encryption of the data, monitoring of things like the laptop, being able to do a remote wipe of that data. There's a lot that a company would need to do to properly secure data if it's in the wild, and in most cases it is. With desktop as a service, we isolate all that data into a single environment. It's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted in flight, and all we do is present an image of the desktop to the end user. The impact of that is considerable from a resource perspective. We don't have to have expensive laptops. We can have disposable Chromebooks. We can use our computer at home. We can use the computer we already own. For instance, I mentioned Mac because a lot of personal users at home, especially the younger generations, will have a Mac. They feel like that's their operating system and their brand of choice, but it's not typically supported in the enterprise. It absolutely can be supported in enterprise with DaaS. So I think that's one big aspect. But the data that resides on that laptop from a company's perspective is minimal to zero. So now that laptop is stolen, it's lost, it's damaged, and we go out, we buy another, and we get connected, and we're back up and running in no time. So even think of that from a business continuity and disaster recovery perspective. Something happens to the office where the users sit, power goes out, it's going to be an extended outage. Maybe they're in a coastal region, they have a flood, whatever that natural disaster or catastrophe may be, they can easily relocate, and their data is available and ready to go. So I think that's another strong consideration, especially if most of us are on the East Coast. And I didn't mention in my introduction, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and we don't have many disasters here, but when it snows, we shut down. So these are what we would call our marketing silos. I think that's kind of the proper terminology for it. And what I'm going to do here is highlight the ones that we're going to be talking about here. We're putting them all up here because it's easy to show the slide. I want you to have some purview of the different things that we offer. There are lots of products that make up these silos, but these are nice, easy ways for us to present it to you to say, we do desktop as a service. Well, there's several technologies under the covers that create that desktop as a service. Security as a service is quite a few different products. It's certainly not one thing. We use Trend Micro, Webroot, Encapsula. We use Alien Vault, Zen Mobile. There's several products that we use to make up this security as a service, and then depending on the compliance, depending on the customer's requirements, we put the right bits and pieces in place to ensure that we're covering all the gaps and presenting them with what they need. And then SD-WAN, obviously very, very popular. We're not out to just sell SD-WAN. If an opportunity comes to us and that's what the customer thinks they need, we'll consult. We're not here to sling quotes. We'll consult on what it is they're trying to accomplish. The reason we brought this product into our portfolio is because we have desktop as a service, which in this case, we're taking the desktop and we're creating an application out of it. With SD-WAN, we can prioritize applications and we can more reliably deliver that application. So that gives us more control and it gives us the ability to impact the delivery of that service outside of our data center. Whereas prior to SD-WAN, we basically said, well, it's not in our data center anymore. It's not a problem on our side. We wish we could help, but you need to call your ISP. Now we can deliver it reliably. We have more data about those internet connections at the customer premises. And as a result, they stay online and we can still advise you need to call your internet service provider, but at least they're not down during that time frame. So where do we have facilities? As Janine mentioned earlier, Irvine, California, Dallas, Texas, Sterling, Virginia, Amsterdam, Hong Kong. I didn't skip Chicago, but that's a facility that's coming online towards the end of this year. It's being driven by customer demand and strategic partnerships that we have in Chicago. We've been successful at delivering our desktop as a service and all of our applications out of the 3 previously mentioned data centers without Chicago. But it is going to be good for us to have Chicago to cut down a little bit of the latency in that region. With desktop as a service, just real quick, because it kind of parlays into this. From a technical perspective, we want 50 to 60 milliseconds or less of latency from where the customer is accessing the desktop to the data center that's hosting the desktop. We can achieve that with a very, very large percentage of the US with Irvine, Dallas, and Sterling. Now with Chicago, we're basically covered where we can provide that optimal experience to nearly any region in the US. And I say nearly, it still relies on that local internet connection. So for some reason, it's not up to spec and they don't have a technology like SD-WAN, it could impact the user experience. But we're using technologies to maximize the performance and minimize the impact of some of those events. So how do we secure the digital workspace? As I've not really alluded to, but been speaking about, is what we're doing is we're taking all of the data and the applications and we're not pushing them out to the end devices. We're bringing them into that single location. We can serve them out of multiple locations, but for the sake of our conversation here, they will all reside in a single data center. They'll reside in a single, what's called virtual organization inside of VMware, where it's encrypted. And only people with access that should have access will have access. We can even implement things like 2-factor authentication. So when you go to log into your desktop, let's say a laptop got stolen. There's no company data on that laptop, but there's a login to the company data on that laptop. And somehow the person that stole the laptop also knows the username and the password. Now, we're talking about a pretty low risk and minimal risk to the business there. But let's say that happened because somebody put a post-it note. I mean, human error. Somebody put a post-it note with their login and password. Person tries to log in. It prompts them for their code via a technology called Duo. Unless they also stole their cell phone and have their fingerprint or Face ID or code to get into their cell phone, they're not going to be able to get that code, which means they won't be able to get access into that desktop. So it's called 2-factor authentication, sometimes called multi-factor authentication. Creating standard desktop images. So we provide help desk support. And one of the most complicated things when it comes to help desk support is supporting inconsistency amongst individual user desktops. What we're providing is a very standard experience in that desktop. End users can even help support other end users because they know exactly where things are and how they work, because it's consistent across the entire organization. Now, there might be differences from one department to another if application sets are different, but ultimately we have a very standard desktop image. Shadow IT is where end users feel like they're going to come up with a solution to make their job easier, and that's things like Dropbox and leveraging maybe Evernote to take notes when the company wants them to use OneNote, or any opportunity for an end user to use technology that's not supported by the business. What we want to do is give them all of their tools in this virtual desktop, so they don't need to use those third-party unapproved tools. And then centralizing and simplifying the desktop management. So imagine a world where you have 1,000 users and you have 1,000 laptops and or desktops, and they're scattered amongst 6 or 7 or 8 different offices. And if we go by the rule of 2%, we've got maybe, I guess that would be about 20 IT people, probably not 20 IT people for 1,000 users. It's probably more like 10, maybe. So we've got a new application we need to push out to these laptops, but at the same time, we probably want to go ahead and do updates to the operating system. Now, there are some tools that can help us automate this, so I'll take that into consideration. We're going to have 2 guys from IT work on pushing out this new application and updating the laptops. It's probably going to take them a good portion of 2 nights running through and pushing out the images via this automated tool. And now they have to validate which ones didn't work. And now they have to go through and touch each of those laptops and workstations individually because they failed, because the tool didn't work, because the user had their laptop closed, because whatever the scenario wasn't online. And that's probably going to take the remainder of that week at least to go through and touch each of those to get all of the desktops up to spec. Well, crap, we should have done an update and a patch to this other application that we forgot about. We've already started the process. Well, now we got to start all over again. All right. In our world of desktop as a service, one person logs into a maintenance image, which does not impact production. All 1,000 users continue to work in their laptops through whatever time of day it is. This IT person goes into this maintenance image, does the installation of the new application, does the patch of the application, does the Windows updates on the base image, spins it into a test mode, maybe grabs a couple of users to go through and test it, make sure everything works properly, and then rolls it out to production. And that can happen overnight, in the middle of the night, maybe when there's downtime, or a maintenance window because we're 24/7 organization. So from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. Eastern, we're going to run out. We're going to go ahead and roll this into production. The same user, the same IT administrator that did the updates is now rebooting the hosts that provide the desktop image, and then everybody has the exact same consistent updates to their image. And that all happened with probably, and I'm being very generous in saying this, maybe 4 hours worth of work to roll that out. So you can see the considerable cost savings that are kind of soft costs when we look at the cost of hardware and the cost of power and things of that sort. Oftentimes, the cost of overhead of managing the legacy environment doesn't really get taken into consideration, and it's a really important one. And then cloud providers often have greater security resources than in-house IT. Well, we have security people that are focused on providing security. And most organizations, less than, say, 3,000 or 4,000 users, are not going to have multiple security administrators within that IT organization. They're going to need to use a partner. But do you want to use a security partner and a storage vendor partner and a virtualization partner and a network partner and put all of these partners and try and manage those vendors? Or do you want to have one that's been doing it for 9 or 10 years and can do it very, very well? And that's what RapidScale is. So what's the opportunity when it comes to desktop as a service to partners? I really, really like this technology clock that Gartner put together. And if you don't know Gartner, they're probably the most popular evaluator of technologies. Typically, you hear of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And what the Magic Quadrant represents is companies that pay to be evaluated based on that specific technology. And once they've paid to be included, Gartner then has a very and some people will argue this, but I believe they have a very non-biased evaluation of that technology based on market share, based on the maturity of the application, based on all kinds of different things. And it may not be an application, but whatever the thing is, whatever the service is. And then they put them in a Magic Quadrant. Top right's better, bottom left isn't quite as mature, but the company paid to be included and they got evaluated. The clock here is not specific companies. It's not specific technology. It's not specific products. It's more around general technologies. So you'll see as you look through here, managed hosting. Well, you might think of GoDaddy or Network Solutions or some of those, but we're not talking about specific companies. We're talking about that general technology. Public cloud storage, platform as a service. And the idea of the clock is, we start at midnight and the clock starts to tick. The The minute hand starts to tick from 12:01, 12:02, and starts to go around the clock. So when a technology is not just invented or discovered, but once it actually starts to get some kind of market share, that's where we start at basically 12:01. That's where we start to track that technology. And as we get around the clock, we become, we start to establish a dawn of standards where there's some level of consistency amongst providers for providing that specific service. As we get to the 6 p.m., that's really mass adoption. That's as it sees there, if you can see it, zenith of industrialization. Once we get past 6 p.m., that doesn't mean things start to fall off the map. It just means that we become more commoditized. We become a little more obsolescent based on the evolution of technology, maybe based on something that's replaced it, or it just isn't really used anymore. A lot of companies no longer use colocation, but their data probably is still stored in a colocation facility, just not by them, by another company. We are a subscriber of colocation. We don't have the overhead of data centers ourselves, but we have secure cage space and we have our own infrastructure and we operate in our own platform. We still subscribe to colocation. It's not going away. Think of Amazon, think of Facebook, think of Google. They all have data centers. They probably aren't subscribing to colocation, but I can tell you in some cases they are because they still use third-party vendors and third-party suppliers. But let's focus on DaaS. DaaS is still in the top right quarter of the clock. It's showing up on the map. It's not even to the dawn of standards. And we've got, and I can't see it right now because my chat window is in the way, but it tells you on the bottom here, we have 2 to 5 years before we get to dawn of standards. And then we've got another 5 to 10 years before we get to zenith of industrialization. So let's just say we've got 5 to 10 years before we have mass adoption of desktop as a service. That's a huge opportunity to learn, to get into it, to start selling it, to start seeing the fruits of the success of your customers and how it's really impacting them positively. Interestingly enough, we've been doing desktop as a service for 8-9 years. So we were doing it before it even showed up on the map, way before it showed up on the map. And not just anybody can deploy a Citrix-based or VMware-based desktop VDI solution and do it successfully. There's a lot of variables that can dictate success of the product. And we implemented it day one, probably not the most optimal way of doing things, but we've certainly learned over the years and we've tripped over a lot of stones. And we're to the point now where Citrix has recognized us as a partner of the year in growth and enablement because we're really getting traction now with the success of our product because it has matured. And so that's a good segue then to the fact that we are quote unquote powered by Citrix. We were partner of the year. We are a certified global CSP for desktop as a service and SD-WAN, and we are the largest Citrix service provider. And that's because of the number of licenses that we have and the amount of impact that we have within the organization. We even have certain channels within Citrix where we can even impact the development feature sets of some of their products. One specifically that I think is really, really great is a little tool that sits inside the virtual desktop that helps give the end user some indication of the quality of their signal. And think of it as a cell phone. Cell phones from day one had a little signal strength because if your call started to cut out, you need to be able to look and see, is it me or is it the other person? So we have the same concept in the desktop now. And that came from us saying for quite a while, this is something that'd be really great. And they developed it. And it really helps us because if somebody calls into our support desk and says, my experience is not optimal, and they may say it differently, we can ask them to click on the little icon and tell us what you see. And we may find that, sure enough, they've got poor connection, in which case we can focus on resolving it at that point, and we know where to focus as opposed to, well, let's try pinging, let's try this, let's try that. It really gives us some focus. So our partnership with Citrix is very strong. Here in Raleigh, North Carolina specifically, they have a beautiful office in downtown Raleigh, and I meet with the folks there on a fairly regular basis because of that partnership and because of the involvement we have with them. And they're investing a lot in us too. So I think that's probably also worth mentioning. All right. So, and I've spoken about a few of these advantages when it comes to desktop as a service, but here's a nice pretty slide for you to kind of go through them all over again. So eliminate hardware refresh. I would actually probably change this a little bit. I mean, the title says eliminate hardware refresh, but then it goes on to say help extend the life of the hardware. I think that's important. I have a laptop. It runs a full version of Windows 10. It's got a bunch of applications installed in it, but I can also just use a virtual desktop. If I wanted to, I could just use my virtual desktop, and then the life of this laptop would go well beyond the next version of Windows, for instance. The next version of Windows is probably going to require me to upgrade my laptop because it needs more RAM, it needs more processing, it needs more hard drive space. That's not a consideration or concern when you move that entire desktop function and applications into the cloud. Maybe I get a Chromebook, kind of go back to that whole list of devices that we can use to access the virtual desktop environment, which takes you to bring your own device compatible. There's the concept of, let's see, kind of going into companies that provide things like stipends for travel, stipends for cell phone. How many companies provide cell phones to their end users now? I mean, it's rare. You usually don't have a company cell phone. You usually have a cell phone, company reimburses you for your cell phone. Why not do the same thing for your laptop? You already have a laptop at home. Why do you need two laptops? Well, you do because the company has to install their applications into it, and their data can't be insecure, and all these different things. Well, desktop as a service solves for that. Move it all in the cloud. Let your users use their laptop. It's no longer an asset to the company. It's no longer a risk to the company. And pay the employee a couple $100 a month, and they get to keep their device. I mean, that's a perk, I would think. I mean, personally, I'd love to be able to use my MacBook. We all have laptops here at RapidScale, but I also use my MacBook occasionally too because I don't want to carry two laptops around. And then scalable. This is huge. You have organizations that are very seasonal that scale from 50 users to 200, or from 1,000 to 3,000. Say it's tax season, or it's education based. You can probably come up with all kinds of different scenarios where you have customers that are seasonal. And how do you onboard from 50 to 200, 150 users for a period of 2 months? Like, what kind of hardware are they going to use? Does the company have to buy all that? And then what happens when they're not using it? Does it just sit around? So with our virtual desktop, we can scale it out. We can scale it back. I mean, we're accommodating for lots of different types of seasonal customers. So one can scale up in February and scale back down. One may scale up in March and scale back down. So we have those economies of scale that we can accommodate for. We have one in particular who is a mortgage-based company with the influx of the interest rates going up a little bit. Refinances have gone down. I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? And with that, their businesses had to scale back. It's unfortunate, but it's kind of by design, I think, when it comes to the global economy or the U.S. economy. And they've had to scale back. They have our desktop as a service solution. They scale back. And then we're able to accommodate for that. At some point, they're going to be able to scale back up, and then we scale back up with them, and they can accommodate for it. They don't have a lot of hardware sitting around. So SD-WAN. Some of the advantages there, I've already mentioned some of them. High performance. We're going to take 2 broadband connections or more. We're going to send, and this is based on policy, so we can do this based on traffic. We could create a policy that says, do this for some traffic, don't do it for other traffic. We don't technically provide quality of service on SD-WAN. It's not possible. Diff-serve code points, which is a technology to provide quality service. 802.1p is a technology to provide quality of service. It's not possible to do that over the general internet. But what we do is we take 2 or more internet connections, and we'll send the packet for whatever that application is out all of those connections at the same time. Let's say we've got 3. We're going to send the packet out all 3 connections. Whichever one gets to our data center first, or vice versa, from the data center back to the end customer premises, whichever one gets there first is the one that's processed. The rest are discarded. It's not exactly quality of service, but what it is it's taking the most optimal route at that specific point in time and processing the traffic based on that route. So we can say, take our desktop as a service, take voice traffic, take conferencing traffic, anything that's real-time streaming, real-time data, and deliver that it's going to be a cost of 3 versus 1 because we have 3 connections and we're sending the traffic out 3 times basically. But we're going to get it to the end to the other side as reliably as possible. So we're going to call that QoS in kind of a loose term. It also enables mobility. So when we have branch offices, let me go back a little bit. We're able to create more bandwidth by leveraging multiple connections. So we can load balance between them. That would be another policy setting. And then security, well, we're encrypting that traffic from end to end, and we're leveraging multiple connections. So unlike a VPN tunnel, which can only use 1 connection at a time, we're leveraging multiple connections at a time, but we're still providing that security of the SD-WAN. This is a diagram I threw together several months ago, and it does a decent job, I think, of saying, here's the different products that we use to provide security, and this is where they sit in a solution coming from a logical perspective. So Mimecast. If you've been in our space for long at all, you've probably heard of Mimecast. It's email security. They're rated by Gartner very, very high. I don't know if they're number 1. If they're not, they're really close to number 1. They have a very, very reputable product. Basically, any kind of email that's coming in, any email going out, they're gonna filter it. They're gonna look for things like targeted threats. They're gonna look for phishing. They're gonna look for things that you don't even really care to understand. They're looking for, and they're constantly adjusting their filters to ensure that they're catching as much as possible. They also have a business continuity feature that allows Outlook to not only connect to your primary Exchange server, but fail over to their cloud copy of your email in the case your primary Exchange server goes down. So they provide an SLA of 100% for email connectivity. So Mimecast is really, really strong around email security. It's a cloud-based solution. The security is enforced in the cloud before the threats get into your network. Encapsula is very similar for web security. It's a cloud-based solution. We're going to stop any threats that are targeting your web server. Doesn't matter where your web server is hosted. You don't want your reputation of your company or financials for potentially e-commerce site impacting your business. So we're going to stop all of those threats before it gets to your web server. We're going to stop DDoS attacks. And that's all going to happen with the Encapsula cloud-based solution. So that's outside of the network. At the perimeter of the network, we have Fortinet, which is our firewall of choice. And we're going to be able to do things like IPS, IDS, stateful packet inspection. We can enforce 2-factor authentication. We can do virus and malware protection within the traffic stream at the perimeter. So think of this as the front door to your house. Think of Encapsula and Mimecast as the gate to your community. And then when you get inside the house, you have Alien Vault, which is going to be your security system, glass break sensors, noise sensors, light sensors, video recorders, anything that you would have in a house security system with the best security you're going to get with Alien Vault and also Trend Micro when it comes to antivirus, anti-malware within the virtual machines that are inside that environment. And then in this description here, in this depiction here, we have remote offices and disaster recovery sites. What we're basically saying is we can protect all of those with this holistic solution. I've also mentioned Zen Mobile and Duo because it helps us secure those endpoints for the scenarios where we need to be able to do remote wipe, tracking of mobile devices, enforcing of policies on mobile devices, and adding 2-factor authentication for access into the applications. Those are the additional items that we use for that. All right, I promise you we've only got a few more slides here. So what are our target customers? And we did add an extra metric here, which I'm happy about. So under business size, and Janine had mentioned a little bit of this in the initial introduction. So small to mid-market, and that's subjective. So what's small, what's mid-market to you? Anything greater than 50 users is where we're really looking to focus on. We do have customers less than 50 users. Typically in an organization with less than 50 users, there are 0 IT employees. So if you look two lines down, we say 1 to 10 IT employees. If there's not somebody in the organization driving decisions around technology that has the company's best interest in mind, that's focusing on the line of business applications and the evolution of those line of business applications, it's not going to be the best scenario. That's not to say that we don't have those customers, and we do, but they have a lot more overhead because they're relying on us for everything. And it's difficult for us to focus on that customer when it comes to long-term strategy when we're providing their day-to-day IT. Where we're really successful is where we have 1 to 10 IT employees. There's employees in the organization focusing on the direction of IT, the strategy around how IT can benefit the company, not be a cost to the company. And then we extend their bench. So they don't need to hire a storage architect. They don't need to hire a network architect. Like that's what we are for them. They need to hire a director of IT. They need to hire a CIO. They need to hire people that are going to be focused on how IT can best impact them. And then we work on implementing and executing on that strategy. So for a business profile, of course, multiple locations. I mean, I think that goes without saying at this point. Business profile, brick and mortar is great. Anything where IT is a cost center, like I just mentioned, where IT supports a line of business, that's what we're really trying to get them to focus on. And that really resonates well within companies where the guys, if somebody needs to go on vacation, now everybody else has sleepless nights. That should not be the case in any company. And we can eliminate that. We can bring quality of life back to those IT employees. And then verticals, I mean, you could just kind of wrap this up into compliance. Any vertical that has compliance, and they almost all do these days, that's where we can really help because of those security products and because of being able to isolate the data into a single facility. All right, case study. This was a large lumber manufacturer in the Northeast. They had 4 IT employees, and they did not have a great quality of life. They had licensing challenges. They have 22 locations, so there's back to your multiple locations. They weren't able to really support the business from an IT perspective. They were obviously costing the business a decent amount of money. They were up for hardware refresh. They had frustrations managing a bunch of vendors that ultimately there was no consistency or congruency amongst those vendors because the vendors didn't know what each other was doing. And what they needed was a kind of, it's not one throat to choke, it's one back to pat. That's how we like to focus on it. But they wanted somebody to really take ownership of the IT footprint, to help them with their strategy and ultimately kind of take primary on management of it. One thing that sets us apart, I think, from a lot of our competitors is that we'll share management of the solutions that we provide. We're not scared to fix something a customer breaks. And that's really the risk that a lot of our competitors try to mitigate by saying, either you can manage it or we're going to manage it, but we don't want to have to deal with you breaking things. And then there's finger pointing. The auditing is really good these days. So we're going to know who broke it. And we're not going to be out there to say, well, you broke it, now you fix it. I mean, we might point out that, hey, so-and-so in your organization broke this, but we're on it, we're fixing it. But what it really does is it brings a much better support experience to the customer because they may want to hop in and add a user. They may want to hop in and add a firewall policy. They may want to, whatever it is they want to be able to do. They may want to go in and do a restore of a backup or of a file. They can, of course, submit a ticket. We can do it for them, or they can do it. It doesn't really matter. This particular customer, 420 desktops. Certainly not our largest customer. We've got a customer with 4,000 desktops. We've got several customers with over 1,000 desktops. So 420, really nice sweet spot. Really, really, really good sweet spot for us. We took over and moved all of their desktops to our cloud. We consolidated their Microsoft licensing and did a combination of our service provider licensing agreement for licensing inside the desktops and Office 365. We also replaced some Citrix licensing that they had. We implemented SD-WAN to provide more consistency around delivering that desktop to those 22 locations. And the savings on the connectivity by going to broadband versus dedicated connectivity and MPLS actually saved them money. That's not always going to be the case. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's about improving the experience with the customer. And then by doing that, we really future-proof the network. Let's say they get fed up with support or their local cable provider jacks up their prices and they want to go with the new guy in town. They can do that, and it's literally going to be zero impact to the end users because we have the other connection or other connections that they can leverage while we're swapping out that less desirable connection with the new provider. A lot of times we don't even put the MRR on there, the monthly recurring revenue in this case, just to kind of get a scope, an idea of what all of these things are costing this customer and at a cost savings. This came in around 65,000, and so it kind of gives you some kind of idea and scope. But they use most of the services that we have. If it was just 420 desktops with us providing help desk support, for instance, it certainly wouldn't be that much. So there's obviously a scale based on how much of our products they're subscribing to. All right, Janine, do you want to go into the spiff aspect of this, and I'll take a drink of water?
Sure. So, hey guys, Janine here. So right now we are running a spiff for Citrix, and specifically the Citrix DaaS offering, and also the NetScaler SD-WAN devices. So if you guys have opportunities, what you want to do is you want to reach out to your channel manager at Chorus, or you can reach out directly to me, and we can get get it rolling. And once they close, you'll either get $4,000 for the SD-WAN, so that would be 10 NetScaler devices. To give you a little bit more background, the 10 NetScaler devices, what they would need is they'd need basically 10 different locations. So a customer with 10 locations where they would have the SD-WAN devices, and then $1,000 for a DaaS implementation over 300 employees. Do you want to hit the next slide there then, Dylan?
Yeah, sorry about that, Janine. Just I was on mute and
you're fine.
Couldn't get. There we go.
You're fine. So hey guys, I know this was summer school, and what we have here is a little extra credit for you guys. So I know that Dylan did a fantastic job walking through all of the different benefits of DaaS and how it can help you, how it can secure your environment. Hopefully you've learned something today. And what we're going to do is, if you have learned something, the first two people that will either email Dylan directly or tweet at RapidScale 3 of the benefits of DaaS, then we will send you a $50 gift card. So make sure if you learn something, shoot that email over or send us a tweet, and we'll get a gift card at your doorstep there. So I don't know if we want to open it up for questions now, Jamie, or what's next?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we had some questions coming in, so
yeah. So let's.
If you want me to, yeah.
Rapid fire, basically. See how many of these we can get through in the next 5 minutes or so. So some of them, I feel like you guys did such a great job with that thorough presentation. At the top of the chat box, we have, how does RapidScale use secure data sharing to improve doctor-patient connections? Any medical examples that you can quickly shout out?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have quite a few medical-based customers, dental, kind of general health care, urgent care type scenarios. From the patient room perspective, a lot of them are moving towards a kind of a DaaS scenario, because they can move from room to room, and they don't have to worry about and they're also typically using laptops, and they're getting banged around quite a bit because they're moving around quite a bit. The scenario there usually works out fairly well when they're using DaaS, because they can swap out laptops and not have to worry about the data that's on it or the encryption on the end device. And then they communicate up into their application, which then of course their patient portal is able to pull from. So yeah, it's a nice isolated, secure solution from end to end there.
And these 4 or 5 questions were actually provided by Michael Vivrito before the presentation. So I think he did a good job of answering 2, 3, and 4. And 5 even, when you say how quickly does RapidScale adopt the latest and most important market trends, you sort of set it up with that lumber example of how you're future-proofing the network and really setting them up so they can swap out providers easily, correct?
Yeah, and I think the second question that's in here, I think I can also answer, kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. RapidScale is a relatively small, and when I say small, we've got just under 100 employees. We're very efficient at what we do when it comes to the output of work from our employees and the automation that we have on the back end. But the reason I mention that is I've come from a much larger company where evolving to new technologies to provide customers can be a relatively lengthy process. The one company, my most recent company I worked for, they called themselves, from a product perspective, fast followers. And I think that was very generous, because it took them a long time to determine what the next thing was going to be, determine how they were going to go about getting that implemented, and then actually delivering it to the end client and consumer and make it available to sales. We are very, very nimble. We're almost in the opposite, where when we see that we have either maybe a customer brings it to our attention, or we just see that this new technology is something that really is going to benefit our customers, we can adopt that very, very quickly. There are some advantages to having a 6 to 12-month process to evaluate a technology. I think there's more advantages to adopting the technology very quickly, being very straightforward with that particular client or customer or consumer on the fact that they may be first, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and ultimately at the end of the day, we're going to be providing that solution end to end, supporting it for them, and we're able to provide that most recent, latest technology for them, and that's across the board when it comes to technology. So,
well, it makes sense. Rapid's in your name. Next question.
Yeah, exactly.
From Anthony Pyrrhic. Does RapidScale have a solution that would provide the infrastructure capability for about 150 concurrent connections from a VDI standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, as we've talked about in the webinar, 400, 500 desktops is a really, really good sweet spot for us. We do less than 50. I mean, 150 is right there in the middle. So we absolutely have the infrastructure to do that. All of our infrastructure is built on NetApp, Cisco UCS, Cisco Nexus, VMware is our hypervisor, and then Citrix, obviously, for the XenApp and XenDesktop deployment. Our internet infrastructure and networking infrastructure, we've got multiple suppliers in each of our data center facilities. We own our IP space, which means we control and are not tied to any one provider. Something else that sets us apart is we actually don't charge for bandwidth, inbound or outbound. Not many companies do that, much less provide 100% SLA for free bandwidth. So that works out really well when we have, for instance, this lumber company where there's 22 locations. They actually bring all of their internet traffic from those remote locations into our facility. We provide content browsing services so we can scrub out known malware sites if they're browsing the internet, and then they use our internet service. That usually is cost prohibitive because you're paying for bandwidth at the customer premises, then you're paying for bandwidth inbound at the data center and then outbound at the data center, and it doesn't make financial sense, though there may be a company policy to force it. It's just going to be expensive to the company.
So that's
not the case with us. We don't even charge for bandwidth.
Yeah, and you just answered Danielle Gallagher's question: is your SD-WAN carrier agnostic? The answer is yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Awesome. Quick question from Mike. Do you guys also offer virtual browsing technology?
Virtual browsing technology. I'm not quite sure what that is. If it's content browsing, so that someone who is browsing the internet, we're able to filter malicious traffic. Absolutely. We have different ways to do that. We can use either Cisco Umbrella. We can use the Fortinet product. If it's in the reverse, where we're protecting the web server, we have Encapsula for that. So I'm not sure exactly if that answered the question, but hopefully it did.
Mike, does that work for you? I'm trying to unmute you, but I couldn't. So maybe you can unmute yourself and just confirm. Maybe that's a technical issue on both ends. So I'll just, I think that's what he meant. Content browsing sounds right to me. All right, so it's top of the hour now, and I know we're running out of time quickly here, and we still have to give away some money. Everyone loves that. So we will get to all these other questions by email after this. Thank you so much for your amazing participation. We have three more webinars to go. Next week we have Fuse, and then up on deck will be Comcast, and we'll end the month with 365 data centers. So don't miss a single Wednesday. Again, a bonus for all those who attend all 7 webinars. Thank you again for our fabulous RapidScale presenters, Dylan and Janine. And to our partner, Eat Engage, if you're happy with your lunch, please contact your Chorus channel manager if you'd like to use this registration plus lunch ordering service for your next lunchtime prospect meeting, perhaps. And don't worry, let's go ahead. We have not forgotten, draw that winner of the $100 gift certificate. So a shout out to all those folks, 3 of you guys who pre-submitted those questions. Here we go. The winner of the $100 gift certificate, thanks to RapidScale and Chorus Communications, is Anthony Perrick. Thanks again. Congratulations, Anthony. And thank you also RapidScale for that spiff. That's awesome. We'll be sure to participate. Thanks again for joining. I'm your summer school host, Jamie Scotto-Kataya of JSA. See you next week, same time, same day, for the next episode of Chorus Summer School Lunch and Learn. Happy networking.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.